Just found out a better way to eat Oreo cookies. Did you see that? You take the fork, put it in the white, and then you can dip it. You're welcome. Thank you, 12 Stone, for helping us out with those videos. And we are taking a look at the book of Proverbs, and we're going to jump into that in just a little bit. It's week 3, and we're at a 3-day weekend, and so I figured, you know what, let's talk about work. I mean, what else would you rather talk about on a 3-day weekend than work? And you're like, really? Seriously, Pastor? Really? We're going to talk about work. You know, I love work. I love using things. Anybody else love to use a hammer? I've gotten to use this a little bit more in the last few weeks than I had for a little while, doing a little project. And great thing about hammers is they can be used to like tear things apart. Like, you know, hitting drywall and pulling out, you know, taking out walls and stuff like that, but also nailing things and putting things together. Great use. And this was actually a present from my wife way back in the day. But it's what I wanted. Like, I was working construction at the time. Like, I need a good framing hammer. And I don't remember if I told her what a framing hammer was, and like pointed it out to make sure that she got the right kind of hammer. How many of you knew that there was more than one kind of hammer? Like, some of you like, isn't a hammer a hammer? Yes and no. A hammer is a hammer, but this is a framing hammer. It's a little bit longer, a little heavier, and made for swinging and driving in nails. Okay? You don't want to use it on trim carpentry, just so you know, because it's got a waffle face, and you don't want that design all over your nice, pretty trim work. Okay? And I'm left-handed. How many of you know this is a left-handed hammer?
That's right.
It's not a left-handed hammer. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's what we're doing. We're going to take a look at work and what the book of Proverbs has to say about work. But a couple months ago, we took a look and we had a series called Whose House? We talked about choosing to live wholehearted, and we looked at 2 rooms. On one day, we talked about the kitchen and the garage and how that was a symbol, a metaphor for our workspace, and how we were to live our lives wholeheartedly. And that meant to begin to see our workplace as a place of worship. That in fact, worship is a lifestyle, and that if we are to worship God, that we don't just worship God in the sanctuary, but we worship God in particular, as we talked about that Sunday, we worship God as we work. That we work in a way that worships, that honors Him. And we talk about how worship is a lifestyle. And so try to just encourage you to really begin to see your work as a place of worship. A place to honor God. And as we look at Proverbs and look at life hacks, I want us to see it, basically that truth from a little bit of a different angle. And here's our big idea for this series. It's lean into the wisdom of God and glean from those who live it. As we look at the 31 chapters of the book of Proverbs, a couple weeks ago, we basically just launched the series and said, you know what? From Proverbs 1 to Proverbs 31, we keep seeing how God is the source of wisdom. And living one's life for God and according to God's ways, that's the wise life. That's where wisdom is. If we want life to be a little bit easier, to make a little more sense, if we want to be a little less frustrated, then we need to understand God's way for living. And the book of Proverbs has a lot of great practical advice for how to do so. And oftentimes the proverb writer will say, listen to my advice. Son, listen to my advice. I'm going to give you some instruction. I'm going to give you some training. And then we'll go into different areas. We talked about marriage last week, and I want to talk about work today and what the book of Proverbs has to say about work. And as you're taking out your teaching notes, you probably see something. You see a lot of this right here. It's like Pastor Len, there are no fill in the blanks. It's just blank. Help. What are we doing? What are you doing to me? Well, we're talking about work, so I'm going to make you work. You got it. You guys, this is going to be a great day because you're there, you're paying attention, you're following, you're tracking with me. So here's what I want you to do. I think it will probably be easiest if you take your notes, if you're going to follow along, which I would encourage you to do so. If you take it and flip it sideways so it looks something like this, and then if you would go ahead and just make a chart, we're going to look at 4 different people or characters, if you will, or characterizations in the book of Proverbs in how they work. Okay? And so if you want to go on the left side and kind of make a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then across, we're going to look at the Proverbs for each of those. And so if you want to give a column for the different Proverbs, and I'll rattle off. A lot of them will be on the screen, but I'll also mention a few others, and you can write those in for each one. And we're going to look at the characterizations, or what do we see about their character? What does it tell us in Proverbs about who they are? And then we'll look at their harvest. Okay, like, what are the results of being that kind of a worker? Having that kind of work ethic or lack of work ethic. What are the results? What does the book of Proverbs tell us about that? And some of that we'll just kind of use a little bit of common sense as well, as we kind of evaluate our own interactions with others and things. And then we'll have one more category, one more column for each of the 4, and it has to do with this kind of idea for today, and something that I just want you to think about. You don't even necessarily have to agree with this statement, but I think as we look at the 4 different ones, the first 3 in particular, I think you'll agree with me that how you work serves as a window into who or what you worship. How you work serves. So pay attention as a window into who or what you worship. So before I try to say, you know what, if you really serve God, then you're going to see your workplace as a place for worship. Now I want to take a look back in a way and say, okay, let's look at how we work. And if we look at how we work, it'll give us a window into who or what we really worship. If we're really living for the Lord or not. So the first person that we're going to come across in the book of Proverbs is the sluggard. Everybody say the sluggard. The sluggard. And some of you are the sluggard because you didn't say the sluggard. It's time to say the sluggard. Wait, I'm not saying that. That's too much energy, too much work. The sluggard. The sluggard is mentioned 14 times in the book of Proverbs. And I want to give you kind of a picture, if you will, somebody to kind of associate each of these different characterizations so that you have a little bit of a better frame of reference, okay? So the first one, I don't know if you can tell who that is. Homer Simpson. How many of you are at least familiar with Homer Simpson? Here's a picture of Homer Simpson dreaming about sleeping. He's sleeping, dreaming about sleeping. And that kind of is in a nutshell the sluggard. All right? So Proverbs chapter 6 says this, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. There's the way of the sluggard, and then there's the way of wisdom. They are not the same. So consider its ways and be wise. So here's some things to be thinking about. Verse 7, it has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. It doesn't have anybody telling it, standing over it, telling it you need to do this, and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do that. In other words, the ant shows initiative. The ant shows some forethought, and just, you know what? I don't have to be told what to do. I look for things. Most employers, supervisors, isn't that what they're looking for? They're looking for people that are self-initiated. People that will just go get the job done. They're not looking for somebody that's a sluggard. The proverb writer continues in verse 9, how long will you lie there? Just, here's a little bit of help, kind of going back to last week from marriage. Don't like tomorrow morning. This should not be your first line to your spouse. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? I'm just trying to help you out. Not the best line to use in the morning. When will you get up from your sleep? Catch this, verse 10. A what? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. I'm just going to stay here just a little bit longer. I'm going to hit the snooze button so I can have just a little bit longer. Is the proverb writer saying a little bit of sleep, a little bit of slumber, or a little bit of folding the hands is a bad thing? No. Follow what the proverb writer is actually saying. When it comes to the sluggard, this is their mindset. They keep saying a little, a little, a little, a little, a little. What happens when you add up a little and a little and a little? You get a lot. You get a lot. The sluggard, they're just going to keep on sleeping, keep on slumbering, keeping on folding the hands to rest. And this is what the proverb writer says. Okay, here's the result. And poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Okay? Now, I want to just help us to understand a couple things. In a way, kind of backtracking and covering something for the whole book of Proverbs. Does that mean that every single lazy person will be a poor person? Not necessarily. You see, there are proverbs that are factual, guaranteed promises. This will lead to this, that will lead to that. Okay? Guaranteed, you'll see it, and it's 100% always the case. You'll also see a lot of the proverbs these are generalizations. Yes, there's going to be some outliers. Yes, there's going to be some things, sometimes when you can say, well, so-and-so doesn't fit that. Okay. Occasionally you're going to find this, but by and large, these are common truths. Okay? And so, principles, practices to understand. Poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Well, I don't have time to go to every single proverb that talks about the sluggard, but I do want to get one more. The sluggard says, there is a lion in the road. A lion is in the open square. Here's the thing. There is no lion in the road. It's the sluggard, remember? As we follow along, as the door turns on its hinges, so does the sluggard on his bed. What's going on here? He just wants an excuse to get a little more sleep. He doesn't want to work. Might even be at work, but doesn't want to work. There's an excuse. I can't do that because of that. I can't do that because of, I can't because of, like full of excuses. So let's take a quick look at the sluggard. Okay, so if you're tracking with us, we got our first category, and we're working across and taking notes. Some characterizations. Well, we see that he's lazy. Proverb writer says, consider the ant, and we talked about initiative, and so the sluggard has no initiative. We talk about the lion. Hey, look, there's a lion. I can't do that. I can't go out. You know what? I'm just going to turn over in bed. Because after all, you know, and sometimes I'm not even going to turn over in bed. I'm just going to turn the pillow over. Because the other side of the pillow is so nice and cool. which is just a phenomenon to me, and I won't go there, but why is the other side of the pillow so cold? Isn't that just something, you guys really like, dude, what is that all about? I'm going to be locked on that for the rest of the time. Okay, now track with me. The sluggard has all kinds of excuses, and so think of yourself and work. Think of the sluggard, all kinds of excuses. Something else about the sluggard, we see in Proverbs 10:26 that they're unreliable. Proverbs 26 says, like vinegar to the teeth or smoke to the eyes are sluggards to the one who sent them. They're unreliable. Like, man, I asked them to do that and they still haven't got it done. They're putting it off. Putting it off. Putting it off. What does the sluggard get? What's the result? What's the harvest for the sluggard? We talked about the characteristics. What's the results of the sluggard? As we look at this, well, Broke City says, you know what? There's going to be nothing there. Another Proverbs, you might want to write this down in the category for the different verses. Proverbs 24 says that when it's time for harvest, they have nothing to harvest. You know why? Because when it was time to plant, they didn't plant. That's the sluggard. And so we look at the characterizations, the characteristics, and then we look at the results, the harvest. Something else I just point out, they miss out on a lot of relationships or have poor relationships because they won't invest in others because it's too much work. Is our relationships work? Is marriage work? Careful how you answer that, with how much enthusiasm you answer that. Relationships are work. The sluggard oftentimes has poor relationships or no relationships because they don't have any initiative. They'll take, but they never or very rarely will give. So just help me out. Who or what would you say the sluggard worships? As we evaluate, as we look into the window of the sluggard, who or what and how they work, who or what do they worship? Self. Good. Any others? Peace. Ease. Okay, ease. Just, you know what? Whatever's easy. Doing nothing. The easy life. That's what they worship. So whatever it takes to be at ease, whatever it takes to not have to do anything or to do as little as possible. And so if can I step on toes a little bit? Not your toes, I'll step on other. So if the government will pay for you not to work, let them! If they'll pay so that you can sit home and play video games all day, let them! And we wonder why our country's finances are not where they should be. It's because, in part, not completely, but in part, because we've encouraged and allowed people to play the part of the sluggard. Now, very quickly, I want to say there are those that are unable to work. They would love to work, and they're unable to work. Oftentimes because of something that's happened physically, and so they're just not physically capable. Sometimes maybe it's emotionally or the mental capacity, etc. But oftentimes physically, they're just unable to work. Should we take care of them? Absolutely. We'll talk more about that even in a little bit. But the sluggard, there's a biblical principle that says if you don't work, you do not eat. And so the sluggard, they worship themselves, they worship comfort, etc. The next person that we see is the swindler. The swindler. Here's a few pictures to help you maybe think of the swindler. Anybody know who this is? Bernie Madoff. Alright? Swindler, right? millions and millions of dollars that he swindled other people out of life savings. Took a bunch of money. Do you know what it was called that he had set up and how he had swindled a bunch of money? It was called a Ponzi scheme, which this happens to be who Ponzi scheme was named after. This is Mr. Ponzi himself. Now below them is another one. I don't know if you can tell who that is or not, or who they represent. But that's a used car salesman. When we think of swindlers, the old kind of thing was used car salesman. And here's the deal. Used car salesmen can be like any other profession. Now they happen to get a bad rap, and sometimes deservedly so, because they were shysters. They were swindlers. And we'll look at the book of Proverbs and see what the book of Proverbs says about the swindler. And so if you're following along, here's our first one. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 14 says, "It's no good, it's no good, says the buyer, then goes off and boasts about the purchase." Catch that? So, again, it's not just how we work, but it's how we approach life and how we approach business dealings, if you will. So you go to buy a car. It's not always the used car salesman, the shyster, the swindler. It can be the one purchasing. Oh, that's junk. That's not worth anything. You go to a garage sale, and you know that something's worth a lot more than even what it's priced at. But you start picking at everything, and it's no good. It's no good. And then you walk out of there and you call your bestest friend. How you wouldn't believe the steal? The what? The steal I just got. Now, if they mark it for $10 and you say, you know what, I'm going to pay $10, that's a fair deal. But if you talk them down in pretense, saying, well, it's no good, and I'm going to have to do that, and I'm going to have to do that, even though that was all fairly represented in the price that they had set ahead of time. And in a way, you walk out and you go, hey, I just got a steal of a deal. Just keep in mind that you just played the part of the swindler. As we follow along at the book of Proverbs, in chapter 20, verse 17, food gained by fraud tastes sweet, but one ends up with a mouthful of gravel. That was a sweet deal. That was awesome. Whew. But then all of a sudden, it comes back on. And then all of a sudden it tastes like gravel. Verse 23 of the same chapter says this, the Lord, what's this word? Detests. The Lord detests. That's a pretty strong word, isn't it? That's not like, the Lord just, No, the Lord detests. It says the Lord detests differing weights and dishonest scales do not please Him. Chapter 11, verse 1, if you want to write that down on your sheet. Chapter 11, verse 1 basically says the same thing. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with Him. Then go to chapter 13, verse 11. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. There's a saying, easy come is easy go. When you work hard for your money, it's a lot harder to just let it go, to spend it unwisely. But when it's easy come, it can oftentimes be easy go. And so if we take a look at the swindler, what do we see about the swindler? They're crooked, right? They're untrustworthy. I think it's fair to say they're selfish. What does a swindler harvest? Well, the one verse said a mouthful of gravel. Doesn't that sound awesome? What else does the swindler get? How does God look at the swindler? Displeasure. He detests. It says, the one will please God, the other he detests. So if one pleases, doing things right and just pleases him, doing things unrighteously and unjustly, I would say that brings his displeasure. So who would we, let's go to the last category on that, the last column. Who would you say the swindler worships? Who? Self? Okay. What? Maybe we can broaden that. Who or what does the swindler worship? Money? Or stuff that you can buy with money? Material items? Okay. I would think that those are all fair things to look into the window of how they work, how they do business. That's what the swindler worships. The third one that we'll come to is the spent. I'm staying with the S's for this one. Okay? There's not a lot on the spent in the book of Proverbs. But I'm going to give you a couple faces. The first one is Harry Chapin, and Harry Chapin wrote the song Cats in the Cradle. How many of you know that song? Cats in the Cradle. So I'm going to show this one because there's not a lot of people that are known for burning out or known for being a workaholic. And yet I could find stories of pastors particularly that have fallen or that have had to step out of ministry because work just became something that consumed them, and because work consumed them, they started going to other things to find outlets. And they neglected their marriages and different things. Some of them turned to drinking. Some of them turned to affairs and different things. We'll come back to Harry Chapin in a little bit. This is a picture. This is kind of the overworked, the stressed out, the spent, if you will. Harry Chapin's song, Cats in the Cradle, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with it, here's a little bit of the song. It says, "My child arrived just the other day, came to the world in the usual way. But there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. He was talking before I knew it, and as he grew, he said, 'I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you.' And the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you coming home? Son, I don't know when. We'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then." And as you follow the song, what happens? Dad doesn't invest in his son. Things kind of flip, switch, if you will. The son does become like the dad. Now the dad's got some free time and the son's super busy. We'll get together then. You know, we'll have a good time. It becomes all about work, about filling the schedule. There's no time, there's no margin for anybody else. Well, here's what Proverbs 23 verse 4 says. It says, "Do not wear yourself out to get richer." Talk about spent. Do not wear yourself out to get richer. Do not trust your own cleverness. Well, if we take a look at the spent, also known as the workaholic, some characteristics, they're worn out. They're trying to earn a bunch of money, oftentimes, trying to earn a bunch of money. Sometimes maybe just trying to make ends meet. But usually it's trying to get ahead. Usually it's trying to get something newer. It's trying to get something better. It's trying to get something bigger. Not satisfied with the car that they drive, or the house that they live in, or the clothes that they wear, or the phone that they use. It needs to be something newer, something bigger, something better, trying to keep up. And sometimes it might even be that they'll say, "But I want to provide this for my family." And we look at that and we go, "Well, that's noble, isn't it?" It can be. But at what cost? At what cost? Because as we look at the spent, what are the results? What's the harvest of the spent? Well, they can become isolated because they haven't invested in relationships. They've invested in work instead of relationships. They often fail to be able to even enjoy the money or the things that they buy with that money. Who or what? We'll just kind of cut to the chase. Who or what would you say the spent worships? As we look at how they work, Or what would you say the spent worships?
Material things.
Material things? Money? Any other thoughts? Prestige. Self comes back into that, doesn't it? It's about me. Oftentimes when we look at the heart of the workaholic, there's something that they're trying to meet. There's something that they're trying to fulfill that is lacking in their life. Identity is at the core of a lot of what turns people into workaholics. Prestige, they're trying to prove themselves to other people. And so they just pour themselves in and they think that if I can just do this, then I'll be somebody special. Then I'll be somebody important. If I can just climb my way up the corporate ladder, if I can buy this and have that, then I can have some sense of identity. The other thing in my mind, in my opinion, and as I've read about and listened to different ones that have suffered with workaholism, those that have lived spent lives. The one is identity, the other is security. There's some sense of insecurity, maybe in their own identity, but also in they want to make sure that they have more than enough. And so sometimes it's, well, there might be a rainy day or something along that line, and so there's this idea that they have to just keep working and working and working so they can get more and more and more, because sometime they wouldn't ever say this, but here's the thought, here's kind of the idea of sometime God might stop being God. It might not take care of me. I've got to take care of myself because nobody else will. And we push God out of the equation. That's what the workaholic does, the spend. And you want to talk about becoming burned out. You try to be God, guess what? You will fry your circuit. The fourth one, the book of Proverbs doesn't necessarily cover a whole lot, but it's this whole one that we see throughout. Talk about the wise. Well, speaking with the S theme, I'm going to go with smarter. The smarter. Now, there are a lot of ways that we can be smarter in our work, right? Right? Yeah. Hey, I don't think so. Yeah, there are ways that we can be smarter in our work. There are times when work calls for a hammer, and you use a hammer. But there are also times when work calls for a hammer, and then, you know what? Something else will get the job done much more efficiently and effectively. That's what I'm talking about. So what do you think I use when I can use one or the other? More power, you better believe it. A lot easier on the arms. Okay? I like a good workout just like anybody else, but you know what? I get the job done a lot faster with this. And I can sustain myself. I can go a lot longer in the day using something like this than just using this. And a lot of nails don't get bent near as badly when I use this as when I use this. Now here's the thing with the smarter. I'm going to take you back to the book of Proverbs just so you can see something in Scripture. Proverbs 16 verse 3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." As we look at the smarter, and kind of in contrast to the first three. In contrast to the slugger, the smarter understands that he needs to work. So he works. He's reliable. The smarter, in contrast to the swindler, understands that, you know what? You reap what you sow, and you need to treat other people the way you want to be treated. And so you do things fairly. You do things honestly. If I say I worked 8 hours, you better believe I worked 8 hours. I'm not cutting corners. Yes, if there's a better way and a more efficient way, a more effective way to do it, yes, I will do that. But as far as cutting corners to avoid things that need to be done, no. I'm smarter than that. Because I know at the end of the day, if I cut corners at some point, I'm going to eat gravel. Either my boss isn't going to be happy, or my customer's not going to be happy. And I don't want to eat gravel. Do you want to eat gravel? Not literally or figuratively, right? And so we work differently. And we're not like the spent. And so we work smarter. And we understand that there's balance. I want to give you a life hack. I believe this is God's life hack for work. Are you ready for this? It's called the Sabbath. The Sabbath. I believe God's life hack for work is the Sabbath. And I believe the Sabbath will help us stay away from, to steer from, to keep from drifting into one of those first three categories. And here's something that I think we need to just allow to sink in a little bit. I think our picture could have been on at least one of those three at some point in our lives. At some point, we've either been the sluggard, or the swindler, or the spent. And I think our picture could have been there in place of Homer's or Bernie's or Harry's, but our picture could have been there. The Sabbath helps us to steer from that. Well, how so, Pastor? I'm not sure how that I follow. I understand, yeah, that the Sabbath. Well, let's go back to Genesis chapter 2. Okay? God worked 6 days, and then on the seventh day, He what?
Rested.
He rested. Did God rest because God was tired? I don't think so. God rested because He wanted to establish a work rhythm for mankind to be able to follow, for us to be able to understand this is the best way, this is how I designed you. You work 6 days effectively, and then there's a day where you rest, a day where you cease, a day where you stop. Okay? And as we look at Genesis chapter 2, just something interesting to me. At the end of every single day, and sometimes there's a break even in between during the day, God would just kind of pause and reflect on what He had done, and He would say, "It is good." And I think there's something in that, and just kind of at the end of the day, or as we're working, just to kind of look back and go, okay, evaluate. And sadly, there's oftentimes, depending on what kind of work I'm doing, I look back and go, it's not good. What needs to be better? How can I improve on this? God, help me out. What do I just need to call somebody else and let them do this? How do I do that better? But God worked into this rhythm, not just in the day, but in the week. 6 days you work, 7th day you rest. And then He follows that up, and we see in Exodus, with the Israelites, God institutes and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to be your God, you're going to be my people. You're going to honor the Sabbath. There's this day set apart. We see in the New Testament, Jesus comes along and talks about the Sabbath. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break it down for each single one of these. Okay? For the slugger, the Sabbath comes back to the word Sabbath. Everybody say Sabbath.
Sabbath.
Now, I'm not somebody that's up on Hebrew, and so I could be mispronouncing it. Here's the thing, though. The word that we get Sabbath from comes from the word that means to stop. And I just want to leave this right here. You can't Sabbath if you never unsabbat it. If you never started, if you never did, you can't stop doing. So the Sabbath reminds me I need to do, so I can stop doing. If we go to the swindler, how does the Sabbath help the swindler? The Sabbath should remind us that we serve a holy and honorable God. As God gave the command to the Israelites to keep the Sabbath, part of the covenant that they would be His people and He would be their God. Jesus also shines some light on this. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In fact, we just looked at this in Kevin's Sunday school class this morning. It talks about Jesus healing a man on the Sabbath. He did it a variety of times. Well, there's one that all three, Matthew, Mark, Luke, cover. Jesus healed on the Sabbath this guy that had a hand that was messed up. He said, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And then Jesus said, and I am the Lord of the Sabbath. But there was something in there. You see, in a full biblical understanding of the Sabbath, and understanding that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, and we understand that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, and we understand how Jesus treated others on the Sabbath. How did Jesus treat the man when he was in need? He did something to help him. If Jesus could help him, he helped him. Can Jesus help? Yes, he can. What does that remind us? How does that remind us with the swimming? Well, it's this principle that Jesus said. We know it as the golden rule. You do unto others as you have them do unto you. In my business dealings, I want to deal with people the way that I would want them to deal with me. So if I sell something, I want you to be able to know that I'm giving you the best deal and I'm a fair deal as much as I know possible. If I sell a vehicle, here's what I want. I've lost money on a vehicle because I'd rather somebody think that they got a good deal than somebody got robbed. And so I've lost money. I've probably lost money on every single vehicle that I've sold. Is that a great way is that good stewardship? I don't know. But I'll leave that, you make that decision. But I'd rather somebody think that they got a good deal than they got bamboozled. Especially when they know one way or another that I'm the pastor at the Kingston Wesley Church. If we go back to the spent, how does the Sabbath help the spent? Well, it's a reminder that we all need rest. It's a reminder that that's how God wired us. It's a reminder of the law of diminishing returns. It speaks to that like God didn't build us to just work. At some point, we're not working the way that we should be working. And when we're not working the way that we should be working, the way that God wired us to work, we're not honoring Him like we should. The Sabbath gives a reset for those that have tendencies to drift towards becoming workaholics. The Sabbath gives a reset. It recalibrates for those that would say, I'm smarter enough and I can do this and I'm going to figure this all out on my own, and my identity is wrapped in what I can do, in my vocation, or what I can accomplish, what I can build with my own two hands or my own brain. It says, wait a minute, I'm not God, and I'm not going to try to take His place. God made the universe, the earth, and everything in the earth in 6 days, and He decided that was enough. He was going to rest on the seventh day. If God would set that parameter and set that as an example, that's something I better pay attention to. And not step out of bounds on that. Be reminded that He's God, I'm not, and if He took a rest, I sure got it. That God has wired us for rest. That we need to take time to just rest and be reminded that He's God. We also see that Jesus would say, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. The Sabbath is a reminder that in Christ we have rest. We don't work. Catch this, because this goes back even to the Exodus. When God parted the Red Sea and led the Israelites out and said, you're going to remember the Sabbath. Part of remembering the Sabbath is remembering that God did the work. And so for us, on the other side of the cross, it's a reminder that God has done the work. That we can't earn our salvation. No matter how much you work, no matter how much good you do or try to do, you can't earn your salvation. And so the Sabbath is just another reminder that points to the cross and say, God is God, I'm not, I can't earn it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it just brings us back to a place of humility to say, God, I want to honor you. And so the Sabbath brings us back to helping our heart to be in a place of worship. And then when we go out in our week, it serves as a reminder that as we work, we worship Him, we honor Him, we serve Him. So let me just encourage you. Take an evaluation. Are you one of those first three? Is there something in you you've been a sluggard? There's work that needs to be done, and you haven't been doing it? Maybe you're the swindler. You're cheating time, you're cheating money, you're cheating this or whatever, or the spend. You think somehow your identity or your security is wrapped up in what you can do. And you need to place that in who Jesus is and what He's done. And find rest in Him. Keep in mind the Sabbath. How are you honoring? How are you keeping the Sabbath? Just a couple of questions. Let that sink in as the Holy Spirit directs. You guys did a great job as I asked you, as we looked at the different ones, and as we looked at the window of their work, and who would that suggest, or what would that suggest is the source or the recipient of their worship? You guys were able to give the answers. Now let's look at our own selves and how we work. And what would that suggest? Who or what would that suggest that we worship? And then just keep in mind the Sabbath, because I think that's a great life hack for helping us keep in line with where we need to be when it comes especially to the area of work. I'm going to invite our ushers to make their way forward, as well as the praise team, as we continue in worship through the giving of tithes and offerings and honoring the Lord with the first fruits, worshiping Him and honoring Him with our offerings, saying, God, you're good, you've blessed us in these ways. And worshiping Him through singing and saying, God, we just want to lift our voices to you. But to understand that we worship Him through giving, we worship Him through singing, but also we worship Him through the way we live. Heavenly Father, may you be honored in our giving, in our singing, and in our praying for your kingdom.